Let's say that you and I are working in the same company and that we have a colleague named Bob, and Bob has been working with us for the past 6 months. Now comes a new project in the same company and we get moved to another department. And in that new department, we have new software, we have new things that we have to install. And one of the things for one of our projects is to install a Python virtual environment. And to do that, normally we just have to go into the shell and do a pip-m install, and then everything should be okay. Everyone installs everything they need, including the access to GitHub, including the access to the service cloud provider, including credentials. All that stuff gets installed correctly, and everyone seems to do it quite well. But at some point, everyone notices that Bob seems to be having an issue, and that is because he looks very frustrated and he looks a bit upset. And apparently something is wrong. And we approach him and we ask, "Hey Bob, is there something going on? Can we help you in any way?" At first, Bob doesn't really want to talk with anyone, but then Bob explains what he has done and why. So apparently Bob was trying to install the Python virtual environment, but inside the shell. So after doing pip-env shell, Bob found out that doing a pip-env install would somehow fail because the installer would try to get dependencies from Python 3.10 instead of 3.9, which was the version that we needed to have installed in our virtual environment. And that's just half of the story. The other half is that apparently Bob decided to remove Python 3.10 because he wanted to achieve only having Python 3.9 installed in his system in order, hopefully, to be able to install Python 3.9 only via his virtual environment, via pip-env install. However, after removing Python 3.10, he didn't know anything else about it, and he just restarted the machine. By doing that, unfortunately, the whole desktop was broken. And the first thing that Bob saw after restarting, as a symptom of this problem, was not having the unlocking screen, which is typical of a theme that comes installed by default in Ubuntu. So that unlocking screen was broken, and what appeared instead was the command line. And after inserting his password to unlock his hard drive, we would expect to see the login screen, so where you can put your username and password. Instead, he came about with a very strange screen, which is not very workable because it comes up with a keyboard in the front, and if you press enter, there appears, it's like a blue login screen, and you can put then your username and password. However, there was no way to log in, so the login screen wouldn't react. So effectively, Bob couldn't get into his desktop. So Bob was in a pretty rough situation at this point because he would need a pen drive. There was no pen drive available with Ubuntu. You would probably need to reinstall the whole system. But what we are going to do is to find a way to help Bob. So right now, Bob doesn't know what to do with his machine. Right now, Bob has a problem. And right now, you and I are going to go through the process of getting his machine back. And of course, this is a story that can happen to anyone who is doing software development. Not everyone knows this stuff, but what's important is that now I share my experience in fixing this problem, and hopefully if you run into this situation or know anyone who's been through this situation, you'll be able to fix for them. So let's get started. So let's try and emulate what Bob did. So Bob did a lot of things when he was making his installation, and the only thing that we are interested in is the removal of Python 3.10. So let's do that one right now. So sudo apt remove Python 3.10. And I put in my password, of course. And now, after this step, we are essentially breaking a lot of things in our desktop. So this is something that I do not advise to do in any capacity, but this is something that, eventually can happen if someone doesn't know better. Let's do that. Our desktop will remain working until we try to reboot. But for now, Let's make sure that it removes everything. If we follow the removal logs, we will realize that there are a lot of dependencies that actually depend on Python. Python 3 has now been removed, and what we're going to do right now is restart the computer. And for that, we can just write reboot. Let's see what happens. The recovery process we are having a look at usually takes anything between 15 to 60 minutes to complete. I have speeded out many of the clips so that we can focus on the important points of this recovery. At this point, we were expected to introduce our password to allow disk decryption. However, because we have broken the theme, we cannot do that via a fancy screen. Instead, we can log it via the shell. Having passed that, we come up to a screen with a rendered keyboard. Nothing much seems to be happening, but we just have to press enter to skip that. If we try to type in now our login password, nothing will happen. And you probably have just noticed that there are some red letters that warn us that some files are missing from some of the themes. In this case, it seems to be related to some missing files from the Breeze theme. The Breeze theme comes with a KDE Desktop, and it's not the same bug that appeared to Bob. Bob had another issue which looked kind of the same, but it was something related to the Plymouth themes, which come with the initial package with Ubuntu. So, to start our recovery process, we will first reinstall the Plymouth themes. To get to the boot menu, we need to press F12 a couple of times. Then we get this menu, we select Ubuntu, and immediately after, we press F2 a couple of times as well. We take the advanced options for Ubuntu option, and then we select the recovery mode for Linux 6. After inserting our password, the decryption password, we then get to this menu. Here we have different options, but because I want to show you how to work with the network manager via the command line, we will go directly to root mode in this case. At this point, we need an internet connection. The internet connection that we saved when installing Ubuntu should be there still, and this is available via the network manager, which by now is disabled, so we need to enable it first. But let's first check its status. It is not running, so let's start it. It should be up in a second. Let's just keep trying. It gives out a list of all available networks. They are blurred, of course, for security reasons, and after a successful connection, the selected Wi-Fi should have an asterisk next to it. So let's first install the Plymouth themes. And now, let's just reboot. Awesome. Now we have the fancy screen back, which allows us to insert our password to decrypt the disk. Unfortunately, we cannot log in yet to our own desktop. For that, we are going to have to reinstall it and hopefully keep some configuration of it, if not all of it. So let's restart again in the same way in recovery mode. For this one and the following restarts, we are just going to use the enable networking option, which activates internet connection and allows us just to install whatever we need. Although we are reinstalling our KDE Desktop, technically we are actually installing it because with the removal of Python 3.10, we actually removed a lot of dependencies, so our system just thinks we still don't have a desktop installed. Let's reboot and see what happens. After the startup is complete, we still see the rendered keyboard, but with these black squares. Nevertheless, we still try to log in, and in this case, we are actually able to finally log into our desktop. Yet, apparently we are not still out of the woods, because we now see all of these black squares everywhere, and even in our logout screen. In any case, it's great that we can access our desktop now, but we still need to do a very specific fix in order to get rid of these black squares. So let's restart again and get back to the recovery mode and the command prompt. We now remove the libqt5 quick5 glass library, and then we are going to add the libqt5 quick5 library. These libraries support the GUI in our desktop, and they contain a lot of widgets that are used. During the reinstallation of the KDE desktop, the wrong libqt5 quick5 library was installed. So this is why we need to do this. Let's reboot and see if we are finally done. The keyboard seems to be fixed. We don't see any black squares, and so does the login screen. So let's see if our desktop is also fixed. This is great. So the black squares are completely gone, and we have our desktop back, and it seems like our desktop environment is completely recovered. The only thing that we still don't have is that login screen, which is very inconvenient with that keyboard appearing all the time. So what we can do, just for now, just for a quick fix, is to select a desktop theme, and we can select a theme specific for our login screen. And in this case, I just pick one, just to give you an example, just a random one. It will ask you to put in your password, and after that, we will still have to type in our password again in order to save these settings. We log out. We do still have a different login theme than we used to have. That was Breeze. But for now, we can say that this was a great success. So we have just recovered Bob's machine. It is now working and functionally has no issue. The only thing is that we miss a bit of the cherry on the cake, and that is to restore the Breeze theme completely. So let's have a look at what we have right now. So if we go to Settings, and we go to Startup and Shutdown, and we go here to the login screen, we see that we have these options available. These are the Debian MAUI, 2 of them, and the V11XOS Dark. This is the theme that we picked during our quick fix. But right now, we're going to put the Breeze theme here back where it should be. For that, we need to run a command, and that is sudo apt-install --reinstall, and then this is what we're going to install, sddm theme Breeze. So the Breeze theme is hopefully installed. Let's have a look if that's the case. So we go to Settings again, and we go to Startup and Shutdown, and there we go. We see there Breeze. Let's now select it, and let's apply, and let's insert our password again. We can now be confident that this theme will be used in the next time we log into our computer. I will show you that at the end of the video. This concludes the full recovery of Bob's computer. But a few questions remain to be answered. How did this actually happen, and how Bob actually got his screen? I don't think Bob at this point will remember all the exact steps he took. To be very honest, most software developers, even I did that, and probably still do, and I don't even notice. We check online if we don't know things, and we just use the commands to the best of our knowledge and to the best of our intuition. And my theory is that Bob started to use a version of pipenv that probably wasn't the right one, or perhaps the path, there was an issue with the path, and while installing Python 3.9, somehow it would go first through the path variable and all the different directories there listed. It would probably find as the first Python version Python 3.10, and there you got a conflict. There are many ways to explain this phenomenon, but the important thing is that we know where to look when things like this happen. So right now the machine is completely recovered, but it doesn't have anything ready to be used. Now I have created an example in the meantime for us to work on, and that is located here in source and in the Python example folder. And here I have placed a pip file, and in this pip file, if we look at it, it is configured to be using Python 3.9. Let's have a look if Python 3.10 is accessible in our system. So for that, we do Python, and it doesn't find Python anywhere. And the reason for this is that if we look at the user bin folder, which is a part of our path variable or our path configuration, we will see that all the Pythons that we have there are the actual Python commands, and there is actually no single Python command. So we have Python 3.10, we have Python 3, we don't have any Python 3.9, and this is basically it. So to get Python to work, we might as well create the symlink back, and that is ln/user bin Python 3.10, and the symlink will be called, it will be placed in user bin Python. Of course, we need to use sudo for that. And now we have the symlink there, and that means if I do Python-v, it will return the version 3.10. But we want version 3.9. So, in theory, if we do pipenv, we should be able to install 3.9. However, pipenv is not even installed here. But what we do have installed here is pip3. So we can use pip3, install pipenv to get pipenv in our system. There is another way to do this, which is sudo apt install pipenv, but this is pretty much prone to errors since version 3. So I do not advise to use this way of installing pipenv. The best way is to use just pip3. So this is part of what we need. The other thing that we need is to install Python 3.9. It doesn't exist in our system, so pipenv will not be able to do that. So if we run pipenv shell, it will say that it doesn't find Python 3.9. So we need Python 3.9 in our system. For that, we can just add a repository. We probably do not have this in our machine. So we're just going to install software properties command. We need this command in order to be able to add repositories. So one way to add repository is this way. And the repository that we need is ppa-snakes/ppa. We can continue. And what this will do, it will add a repository that has different versions of Python, among them 3.9. And now we can just run this command, sudo apt install Python 3.9. Yes. So now we have Python 3.9 installed in our machine. And what we're going to do now is see if we can use pipenv shell. We are inside pipenv now, and if we use pipenv install, everything seems to work correctly. Okay, but this is the happy case. The sad case, which is what happened to Bob, it will be probably very difficult to understand what happened. One of the things I've already mentioned, the use of pipenv installed via apt. Another thing could be that something could have happened to the path, because, and the reason I say this is if we do an echo path on this command line, we're going to see that one of the directories configured in path is this one, share virtual envs Python example, and with this code. So what that means is that our environment is configured there, and it's specific to our virtual environment. But this is, again, this is just path. And if you look at path, something very interesting stands out, and it is this local bin, which is essentially a local folder of my user. But we also have user local bin, we have user s bin, user bin, we have all of these different folders. And I'm also curious to know if in any of these cases, maybe one of these was switched for one reason or the other. It could also have been that Bob, because he likes to install a lot of things, that it could have had installed something that had made a switch in the configuration, or it had made something. But what's important is that when something like this happens, and Python doesn't allow us to do certain things, in this case, it was messing around with Python 3.10 when we just wanted Python 3.9. Let me just check that, by the way. Yeah, Python 3.9 inside the virtual environment, and outside, we should be having Python 3.10. So this is perfectly installed. This is ready for Bob, for everything he wants to do except this. And what I want to say with this video also is one very important thing, is that Python is an integral part of Ubuntu. So removing it is always a bad idea. We can update it. We can use sudo apt-get update or upgrade. We can even install upgraded versions or older versions. But what we don't want to do is to remove Python, because these kind of things can happen. And the great thing about Ubuntu is that when people make these mistakes, they are usually always recoverable. So panicking over something that doesn't work on Ubuntu is always not healthy for the person who's experiencing issues, but also not healthy for the person who's observing these issues. There are no wrongs, and the only thing that there is if we have a problem, we need to fix it. The good thing is that if we keep our cool, we can solve these problems all the time. And as you can see, this problem for some will seem to be very much impossible to solve, where the only option is just to reinstall everything all over again, which would have been very dramatic for Bob, because Bob, let's be honest, he has everything installed on his computer. So reinstalling the whole thing, it's not just the system that needs to be reinstalled, it's everything. And that takes really a lot of time, it's very time consuming, let alone thinking that he had personal things on his computer and even professional things on his computer that he doesn't have anywhere else. All right, everyone, I really appreciate you having watched the film up until this point. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you can use this knowledge in the future to help your colleagues or even help yourself. We never know. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section. Tell me if you have found this problem and if you've found another way of solving these issues. And until the next video, Have a good one. My repository, located in the address below, contains all the commands used in this presentation and others to help you with situations alike. As a short disclaimer, I'd like to mention that I'm not associated or affiliated with any of the brands eventually shown, displayed, or mentioned in this video.